Okay, good day. This video is going to be showing you how to use three screens. And the intent is that we could have basically characters going from one screen to another. I don't want to overwhelm you, and it's probably overwhelming already, but the concept is that they're wired up in parallel. And if I stop the animation and close the code window, the first one has this, I guess it's a hexadecimal number. So it's 0x20. And then if I click on the next one, it's 21 and 22. So then when I bring the code back, you can see that those values are on lines 14 to 16. So that's an important distinction when you're setting up your code. The other thing is that the character is here in the zeros and ones. So if you remember from the animation, or I'll show you again, if you think of the eyes, right? So if I was to switch one of these to 1, then it's actually going to make the one of the eyes goes away. So you can play with those numbers. I would hope that you kind of come up with your own idea for your character, for your what you're handing in. And then if I bring that back, it's not only going to bring it back for one, but it's going to bring it back for all of them. Okay, so you can play around with your character. The important part is that you keep the 8 there and that you have your curly brace here. Now, one of the things that I'm doing to help you save space is anytime we would normally have maybe an extra line or something, I'm going to shrink it a bit. So if you follow me down right here, we could have these all on separate lines. So those would be declaring integers that we're going to use later in the program, and we're going to set them with the initial value of 0, 8, and 15. And it doesn't matter what you call these as long as you continue the pattern. So I just stack them to save room. It's not wrong, but sometimes it's harder to figure out, especially when you're new. The next part is the addresses, which I already showed you where those addresses come from. And you can choose any addresses you want. They just have to match. And then you'll notice that I give them a value of 1 through 3. So now we're in the startup. So this first part relates to the name that you gave it here. So LCD1 would be related to the first one, and LCD3 would be the last one. Now in each case, they're 16 characters wide and 2 characters high. And so that's just defining what they are. You could put these all on one line as long as you separate them by a semicolon. The next part of it, lines 23 to 25, they are creating this character, and we'll get into more detail if we have time, but essentially this character is called Sonic Part 1, and that's because I went to ChatGPT and I asked it for a character for a 16 by 2 LCD screen, and I wanted a Sonic character. You could debate whether that's the same one or not. You could have multiple characters, but the reason I'm keeping with one is just because it takes up less room. Later on, once we have our characters defined, we might find it better to have them all on one line. But right now, it's better to have them this way because you can kind of see the general shape of the character through the orientation of the ones versus the zeros. This is the part where it gets a little confusing. So we have in the past worked with something called void loop, and that goes from this semicolon all the way down to, or sorry, not semicolon, it's a curly brace, down to this curly brace. This is an advancement protocol, so it starts with initial value of 0. Now, it doesn't declare it as an integer because it's already been globally declared up here as an integer. Whereas normally we would declare it as an integer down here. But because we've done that already, and typically this is more resetting to the value to 0 because it's going to change. And then it does it asks you a question. Is the value of I less than or equal to 15? If it is, then it's going to increment it up. And that's just setting the value for I. So then it's going to run these 3 subroutines, and you could have them sort of looking a little different if you want. So this is typically the format that you would see them in, but I'm stacking them to save space again. So the first thing it's going to do is it's going to go to this screen 1, and that's this program down here, or this part of the program down here. So in this void screen 1, everything that's between the curly braces is going to happen. And all that it's going to do is it's going to set the cursor location. The first number is going to be the location left to right, and it's going to go from 0 to 15. So that's why on this screen it goes from left to right. And I'll just show you to remind you that. So character starts from the left and goes all the way to the right. Now you could change the row that it's in. If you change this to 1, it would be down a level. Okay? And then this next one is basically calling the byte 0, which I believe is our character. Anyways, we'll continue on. So the next part is screen 2. So after it's done running this part, it's going to go back to this line 31 in the program, and it's going to run screen 2. So we need a location of J for the second character, and we want it to basically go backwards. So that's where this is J is equal to J minus 1. So we remember at the top of the program, we set J initially as 15. So when you run the program first, it's going to be basically 15 minus 1, which would be 14. And that's why the screen goes from right to left. Now we have to have a situation for when it gets less than 0, because it's going to keep going negatively because it's an integer. So this is basically a statement on line 45 that says if J is less than 0, then J is going to be 15. So that's essentially resetting it. And then this is the location, and this is the object that we're going to display. Okay, and then the last one, so once it's done screen number 1, screen number 2, it's going to go to screen number 3. And screen number 3 is just random. So if you look at the location, it's K. When we have K, we initially started at 8, but as 8 is changed by this part of the program, it says K equals to a random number between 0 and 16. And that way it's always going to be on the screen. And then we're going to go with a delay of 1/5 of a second just to keep it interesting. And then this line here could be written this way, and it would be clearing all the screens after the delay. The delay is so that we can see it with our human eyes, and then the clear screens is so that we don't have a ghost image afterwards. So that's the program. You can choose to write it sort of where you're stacking your lines, or you're not stacking them. The main thing is that you keep track of your curly braces. You want to have the right orientation and the right number of them. And then the other thing that typically happens is you miss a semicolon. If you do get an error, you can copy all of your code and post it into ChatGPT, and ChatGPT will tell you where your code is gone wrong. Okay, so here's the final. Take a look at it. Takes a minute. And I might have messed it up somehow. Nope, it's coming up. So you can sort of see the random nature of screen 3. You can see that on screen 2, it's starting from the right and going to the left, and then it stops and starts. And then you can see on screen 1 where it's always on the top. So if you can get this working, that would be awesome. You can change your character to have fun. You can play around with different lines. You'll see that all the characters are on the first line, and that's the 0 row. And if you wanted to switch that, the place to switch it would be would be here. So for screen 1, this would change it to, if you change, well, we'll change them all, I guess. So then when you run the code, it should be all on the lower row as opposed to the higher row. And so what we're planning on doing next is we're going to try to maybe get rid of all the characters but 1, and then have it go up when we press a button and down when we press another button. Okay, if you want to try that, you're welcome to add a button. I think we've looked at a button already, so you have that possibility. You can always ask ChatGPT for code to do that as well. Okay, so good luck with that and have fun doing it.